Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Robert Keston, Executive Director of Stonewall National Museum, Archives, and Library. And today we'll be talking with L.A. Fields, the author of Riot Son, a tour de force that takes us through some pretty scary times that seem all too real and probably are all too real. We here at Stonewall have the largest single LGBTQ library and one of the largest national archives, as well as a museum where we put up exhibits to make sure that LGBTQ history and culture is in the forefront and on the minds and available to people from all over the country and all over the world. Stonewall is your home away from home. So if you get to Fort Lauderdale, please come and visit us, spend some time with us. You are always welcome. This series of public programs where we interview authors and other talents is an ongoing program. We also do other kinds of events, series, and informational activities. Our next event is a gallery opening here in Fort Lauderdale. Then we have a women's music concert going back through women's history, the women's history of music, primarily lesbian music. Then we go to an event for our educational program, SNAP, the Stonewall National Educational Project, now in its 11th year, and on and on and on. If you're in this area or planning to be, please come see our Pride exhibits. We've just launched a new series that will extend for at least a year, where one of our gallery spaces will be dedicated for that time to those in our community who have long been marginalized. The first exhibit is by Bo McCall, and it's really worth seeing. There's been a lot of press coverage about his exhibit, and we are thrilled that Bo is the kickoff for this new project and this new effort to make sure that the marginalized are no longer marginalized, but a full part and parcel of the general community with their own voice and their own stories that certainly need to be told. And now we will go into our conversation. I read this book a little while ago, but there are certain elements of it that never leave you once you've read it, I believe. The two protagonists are Devon and Garrette. I have to admit that I got confused time and time again which one was which I kept saying to myself is ridiculous because they look and act so completely different. But I guess it's because they have youthful names. And so even though one is a little bit older than the other, I couldn't always tell how much older. But Garrette is, when the book starts, he's only 17, which makes him a minor, which means that Garrette and Devon are breaking the law a few times in this book.
Not necessarily, depends on which state they're in.
Touche.
Of the states, age of consent is 16, and then you'll have a few that are 17 and 18, and since they are in an unnamed, unspecified city, they're good. They're all right. He's also an emancipated teen, so he is independent of parental control. So,
well, that is clear. He doesn't even live with his parents. He lived with his grandmother, was it, or his aunt?
His aunt. Yes. He was coming out of a religious sort of cult upbringing, and so when he came out as gay, they were like, "Why don't you exit the family?" So he ended up staying with an aunt and fell into freelance reporting because, I mean, what else is a boy to do, right? So in such an exciting summer.
And what made you pick this topic? And I have to admit that I didn't know that you were female when I got the book. There's no picture anywhere, and the leads are men. So kept wondering, is the author male or female? Because you write from their perspective, you write their words, you write their stories. And the women's roles, and there are a number of women, but they're definitely secondary, tertiary characters, even though they do move the plot along. in important ways. Devon and Garrette are clearly the central focus. Why was that?
Well, I'm sort of I think of myself, I'm of the like Patricia Highsmith kind of an author, where it's like, sure, you're a woman, but I notice all your characters are just men, just menning around, just being men all the time. Really, the reason I write this stuff is because I write the stuff I want to read. And that starts with just living lives that I don't have access to in a lot of ways, but also there's something so fascinating. There's a quote from an indie film called Jump Darling about a character who does drag, and somebody explicitly asked him, you know, like, why do you do drag? Like, what's this about? Like, are you a failed dancer? You know, like, are you trans and not ready for primetime daytime? Like, why do you do this? What are you doing here? And he said, like, it keeps me alive. And when pressed about why, he said, I don't know, it just has me. And that's exactly how I was like, you got it, that's it. I don't know why, but it keeps me alive and it just has me. So basically this book came about because during 2020, I was unemployed. And so I had a kind of, in a lot of ways for me, it was perfect to be like, oh, pay me to stay home? Well, fantastic. I'm going to write all the novels while I'm at it. I'm perfectly suited for that. I was already kind of a shut-in. So it'd be like ordering Emily Dickinson on lockdown. You're like, no, she's good. Like, so I had all the time in the world to just watch the news. And every day it kind of felt like low-key, is this the end of America? Like, is democracy failing in my computer right now? So in order to kind of contain all the like anxiety, I was like, I'm gonna put it into a story. And it sort of felt like, on one hand, a way to give myself a little bit of like illusion of control over what was going on is to think about it as like just living history, you know, like this already happened, so I can, you know, kind of think about it and control it and talk about it. But in a lot of ways, it was mostly, I think it was a chance after years of writing and publishing, I'm like, this might be my chance to write a Gatsby. You know, like this is a time that's very, this is my time. This is my generation. Like this is the civil rights struggle of my life. So now's the time. Like I've got enough skill built up. I have enough like character building, world building, technology going on in the head. So it was time to basically go as contemporary as something like The Great Gatsby was, but to my time, and to not be afraid of it. I've written contemporary things before, but they were unmoored from like current events, and from until with my YA books until the very end, when I realized, like, wait a minute, kids our age aren't going to be able to have a full-time job at a bookstore with a GED. That's not a thing. So, you know, sometimes reality like intrudes upon fiction, and in this instance, I let reality dictate the plot. So most of what happens in here is kind of like ripped from the headlines, inspired by news events, and I've got a whole spreadsheet of like the details I was trying to keep track of. And in all of that mess and craziness, I wanted one very identifiable love story to take place. The way I described it when I was kind of shopping it around to agents, all of which passed, some of which did so out of like a strange sort of cowardice. But I've got that quote ready if we want to get to that at some point. But mostly it's Call Me by Your Name, but you know, during the riots, you know, they're not having a nice, you know, like easy summer in Italy where they can fall in love in one hectic summer. It's all that love, all that fatalism, you know, and yet all this mess everywhere. There's National Guards in the street, and you're not sure if you're free to be gay or trans anymore. So,
but the gayness of the two protagonists, and one is bi, or at least was bi, and the other one is almost non-binary at certainly at times, and unsure if he's trans.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, with your two characters, you really cover a lot of territory because of their very divergent positions, except for that they do seem to belong together. Yeah,
this is actually my first, as everything I've written is, gay fiction or, gay history, something like that. But this is the first one that is LGBT. It's all the letters, because like his best gal pal, she's a lesbian. Devon, as our more or less main character, we kind of one of the two, of course. He's pansexual, is what he describes it. Just he takes all comers, basically, is how he put it. And then you have Garrett, he just goes by genderqueer because he's so young. He's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, this could develop into being trans, or it could just develop into being, kind of non-binary, kind of fluid, kind of a foot in both camps. He's unsure about it. So that's our Riot Son, basically. He could be our Riot daughter for all we know, for all he knows. But it kind of felt like of all the times to add that visibility to a story, felt like.
So where does the term Riot Son come from?
That I picked up from a lot of the podcasts and like YouTube shows I was listening to. So basically, somebody was out there saying like, well, we were out here in these streets and I found a Riot Son. You make fast friendships when you're out in like terrifying situations like that. As long as somebody's not like an actual avowed Nazi, you're like, I guess we're friends now. Like it would be sort of like on a plane going down. Like, you were a stranger to me 2 minutes ago, but we're brothers now. Like, so yeah, somebody used the phrase, and I was just like, that should be a book title, and I have the ability to make it so. So I went with it.
So it was something that you heard and adopted.
Yes, I was inspired. I felt the calling. Yeah.
With that, and it sort of makes it kind of weirder that it's the Riot Son, but that Riot Son is in a relationship with the person who thinks of him as both a lover and a son. And how do you get past that?
How do you square it? Yeah. Well, a friend of mine did her doctoral dissertation on Christopher Isherwood. His letters to Don Bacardi, which a lot of them have been published, kind of talk about that, where like they had a lifelong relationship. Like that was, I mean, I'd put anybody's marriage up against it, but because of the age difference and because there's this like Socratic sort of, you kind of like help the generation behind you. I saw it just in all the like history reading I've done, like where you'll have Robbie Ross, who was friends with Oscar Wilde, turn around and give a helping hand to Siegfried Sassoon, who was a generation after him, just being like, oh, you're gay and in the arts. Well, come on down. Like, here's ways to survive all of this. Here's ways to make friends and not go to jail, because that's also a risk. So that sort of like, that like, because the Garrett is kicked out of his traditional family, a lot of people are. You'll find it in it's treated a lot in Pose and in the like drag balls and stuff where you have mothers who will adopt these other gays because nobody else will have them. Like you get kicked out of a traditional family, you go out and you make your own. And so there's always a conflict with that. I think I remember in the letters that Isherwood and Bacardi had, they talk about having to like let him date other people because it was the responsible thing to do as an elder, is to let him make that choice. He may not want, to tie his life to somebody he's going to have to like care for as a parent as he ages, and to, be responsible enough for that, but also to be in love with him and to want to keep him just as much as anybody wants to keep their lover, their spouse, their boyfriends and girlfriends. And so, yeah, it's always been a balance. I've seen it like in a lot of history. So I'm like, yeah, it's weird, but like, I believe that Isherwood adopted Bacardi at some point because that's just how you had to do it if you wanted him to inherit your estate. Or if they didn't do it, they considered it. It was one of the ways it gets done. And it's like, well, that's kind of weird, but like the world won't let you be any other way. So you'll find a way to make it happen. So if nobody else is going to finish parenting Garrett, well then, God damn it, me and my friends will do it. And if we fall in love, well then that's just what happens as well. So yeah.
And they did all of that, and Devon's friends were very helpful.
Yes, even they were uncomfortable. They were just like, I mean, it's great, but he is awfully young. I do not approve completely, but he is free to do as he wants. Like, that's what age of consent means. If you don't like it, you're gonna want to call your senator. And then you're also gonna want to do some research on how there's an exemption for heterosexual marriage down to, I believe, 12. So you be mad at somebody else and not me. But yeah. But everybody
from your perspective, what is the most salient part of their relationship? Because it's not that they're both journalists.
No, not really. I think in a lot of ways it's that they're both still boys. They're both so curious and full of delight at the world. The one of the leading characteristics of Devon that people kind of point out a few times is that, like, he seems awfully boyish, doesn't he? Like, he's still making dirty jokes, and people are like, I mean, like, that's cute, like a little boy. And it's like, yeah, it gets kind of old with somebody his age, but he just, I mean, some people have that zest for life no matter how old they get. And so he's got that in common with Garrett for now. I think he's very aware that they may not always have that in common. As Garrett grows up, he might mature far past Devon, and Devon's well aware that, like, you've got it now. He seems pretty sure that, like, love is forever, but what does he know? He's barely been here for a minute. So it's something that everybody is kind of aware of, that, like, Devon's the one who thinks, like, this relationship may not make it. And Garrett's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're in love, we're here. What's the problem? And they're just like, you don't know, because you haven't grown enough to realize that you're going to change, and then everybody does. So I think that might be sort of what they have in common, is that sort of, like, this mad youthfulness, and it's undetermined whether or not Garrett will hold on to that, although I'd hazard to guess he might, especially if he stays friends with Devon. But
and then there's that whole part about Garrett rearranging Devon's apartment.
Yeah.
Putting order, the young one putting order in the older person's life.
Yes, Devon.
Where did that come from?
I mean, like, I'm a very orderly person, and I've met a lot of people. When I get into their rooms, I'm just like, do I have permission to fix this? Like, you know, like, obviously if they say no, you know, move it along. It's not your room. But if people are just like, yeah, go ahead, if you want to clean for free, you know, have a good time. So he's just sort of like just a naturally orderly, like almost compulsively neat kind of a person. He's got his ducks in a row. He's got his suitcases all lined up underneath the bed. And meanwhile, Devon's apartment is just full of, like, I don't know, like guns and nonsense and booze hidden in weird spots he doesn't even half remember. And because he kind of had an open invitation to anybody who's out protesting and just needs a port in a storm, basically, that, like, he's had people kind of stay over. As a journalist, somebody who's traveled for his journalism, like, he's done, like, foreign correspondence in war zones, he's not particularly attached to the place, so he just kind of, like, drops crap where it lands. And I believe the way I put it in there is, it was like, hey, you've just moved in. I want to give you ownership to this space. So it was kind of Devon's choice. Like, do you want to rearrange this? I feel like you would enjoy that. And he was like, yes, I do. And it was basically an opportunity to say, like, darling, you make my house a home. Like, that's, you know, like, your bride over the threshold, basically. Like, come in and give order to my life if you want to. And he does. So.
And now what people don't know, since we haven't discussed it, is throughout this entire book, these two are out on the street covering these riots. And sometimes these riots are extremely violent, and people come in from outside to participate and to help, and then they leave. And one such person is a friend of Devon's, who comes, I believe, from Texas.
He might have been North Carolina. Devon is from Texas. He's our our Texan and journalist. Wayne David, I think, is probably North Carolina, somewhere like that. He's got a nice Gomer Pyle kind of an accent, very like hillbilly. So, but they met when when Wayne David was serving abroad and Devon was there, you know, as a reporter. And so they just kind of like meet, shake hands, and be like, all right, catch you back home if we both make it. All right, high five. And so, like, they became like fast friends that way. And so, yeah, he does show up for a little bit.
And he stays with Devon, and Garrette moves out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for about a week. Yeah, and he was surprised. I think my publisher, when he read through it, he was just like, did he not know that his friend was gay? And I'm like, oh no, apparently not. Like, so he kind of comes in like, oh, what happened to the girlfriend that I used to hear about? And like, yeah, she left me for her own girlfriend. So now I have a boyfriend who, depending on when you ask him, may not be my boyfriend. They're very fluid. I did say that I shot this around to agents too. They were also just like, it's amazing that all of these people are so comfortable with everyone being gay all the time. Like, hey, you hang out with the cool enough people, like who cares about labels, man? I mean, I've got the kind of friends. I'm a New College of Florida alum. I know they've been in the news a lot recently. What with the like light fascist, attempts to take over and re-indoctrinate the youth. I'm actually wearing a nice New College of Florida, the Four Winds, representing. I myself am from Florida, born and raised, Gulf Coast, but I guess when you hang out with people like that, everybody's just waiting for a commune to start, basically. So like, this is the circle that they're in, where it's just like, did you buy a farm yet? Because as soon as somebody buys a farm, we're all going to show up and just like bring whatever skills we've had that we've learned the hard way out here in life, and try and make our own little society, and hope that we don't have to defend it too hard.
In that one series of chapters, they discover such a place in the city that has been taken over and is a peace zone, which Garrette does not stay in, but Devon stays overnight.
Right. So there were a few instances of autonomous zones in the real life 2020. And so I made a sort of amalgamated version of that. So they call it the Plaza Zone, Plaza Land, Autonomous Zone of America, I believe. So it could still be called the Plaza. And so, yeah, they go there as journalists. As far as Garrette thought, that's what he thought they were doing there. Like, oh, we're obviously going there as, observers. Most of my characters, all these main characters, are observers. They're lawyers, they're medics. They're not necessarily the activists participating in it, but they're allies, basically. That's kind of how I think of this, is the Book of Allies, to be included in the Apocrypha with all the other books that come out of this messy time that we live in. So when they go to the autonomous zone, yeah, they meet a lot of people. And that's where you see a difference in the kind of, journalists that they consider themselves, where Garrette's like, well, we can't participate. That's not what we do. And he was like, oh, no. As soon as I stepped on this hallow, cop-free ground, I immediately stopped observing, and I am participating. But he's more of that's Devon. He's an anarchist in his heart. So as soon as he gets to an autonomous zone, he's like, hell yeah. He was so happy to see the, all those, the blightful art that they do to make sure that homeless people can't sit down, make sure there are, railings on benches so that people can't sleep, people can't get comfortable, that there's spikes, like this isn't a beautification anymore. Let's spend money to make sure that people can't sit, that there's no free space to be outside. And so as soon as people take over that Plaza Zone, they start ripping that shit up. They're like, let's get this out of here. Not in my free zone. So as soon as he sees that, he was like, good, kick this crap out of the autonomous zone and we can all lay back and relax. And so, yeah, he finds his people there. And Garrette's like, okay, well, I'll catch you back home then. I see that this is something that you need to do for you. So, yes.
And how does LGBT stuff play a seminal role in a book that is largely about something completely different? I mean, I understand that liberation is liberation and it could be for everyone, but there's not really discussions of gay liberation, or there's not discussion about moving that agenda. And I'm not saying anything wrong with that, because certainly there are plenty of LGBTQ plus characters. But does it play another role in the book, or a subliminal role in the book, other than just these characters happen to be gay? Or is it that you're showing that they can just be gay and still do all of these other things, and just like in real life, it doesn't matter?
I'd say a little bit of all of the above. So I recently saw like the Ken Burns Vietnam documentary, and kind of, well, I mean, I was born in the late 80s, so I don't have any like living memory of what the wild and crazy 60s were like. But I mean, we all hear about it. You know, the fashion comes back into play. Certainly New College was founded in the 60s and still tries to hold on to some of that old hippie fire. And they certainly, at least the last time I was there, the unofficial motto was from Star Trek, being there's more to running a starship than answering a bunch of damn fool questions. That's the holistic principle of learning, not just memorizing facts, but learning how to think, you know, because there's more to it than just knowing the rules and what's come before. But what I learned from watching that documentary is that all of the civil rights struggles that I had learned about were not discrete pockets. It's not, okay, well, here's the Black liberation struggle, and here's women, you know, trying to get their struggle going, and here's the gays over here, you know, like, and what about one Black lesbian who walks through all of this, you know, like these things all intersect, and they all kind of feed, like, it's sort of like when a union gets going somewhere, they increase the wages for even non-unionized workers around them. When one minority gets an extra piece of freedom that they shouldn't have to fight for in the first place, it kind of buoys everyone around you. So like, well, why not us? And what if you cross some of these lines? So I would say it's all part of it. There's something that's very much uniting about understanding that thin blue line for the police, that's them versus everybody else. So if you aren't in their club, you are outside of it, and you may be subject to their discipline. And that's something that we can all be afraid of, because that's what's so terrifying about, and what prompts all these protests and stuff, is that, like, I don't know who you think you are, that you're safe from state brutality. You are not. It happens to Black people quite a bit, but it also happens to white people. There was a white man who was basically shot playing William Tell in a hotel room somewhere, because the cops were saying, like, get up, cross your legs, do this, do that. And because he wasn't complying with impossible rules, was murdered. You just get executed for stuff like that. So it's not a worry for men or women or for one race or another. It's something that can come for all of us. And it's one of those, you know, I believe MLK quotes that says, like, you know, if you don't say something when they come for your neighbor, like, who's going to speak up for you, kind of a situation. The sooner people recognize that and see any struggle for civil rights as part of the whole, the easier it gets to walk into that plaza zone knowing that you are free as long as you're not a fascist here. So all are welcome.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I do agree that every liberation movement is based on whatever has come before. And I think that one of the reasons the LGBTQ community has moved so quickly and accomplished so much is because leaders from the women's movement, from the labor movement, from the civil rights movement, all became leaders in the LGBT movement. And they brought that experience and that commitment to it.
You pointed it out last month during the previous interview that basically the cool thing about the LGBT community is we're in all the other communities. We're in every country. We're in every subgroup. We're in, like, there's nowhere that this is just part of being human. This is just a statistical fact of human beings. Like, the more you have, like, well, some of them are going to be somewhere on this Kinsey scale. And what's also cool about that, as far as it comes to gay rights, this is something I pointed out. I believe it might have come out of some Eve Sedgwick reading done back at the old alma mater, but it was that a lot of what will happen when any minority wants rights is they'll get tossed aside because, like, well, where are your greats? Where's the Black Shakespeare? Where's the Hispanic, Michelangelo? But when you ask that about, like, well, where's the gay Shakespeare? Where's the gay Michelangelo? Well, I have news for you. You're looking at them. We've always been here. Kings and queens, heroes and villains across the spectrum. So it's a one of the unique ones, sort of like the like labor rights movement. Like, this permeates all others. Is that the gay struggle can kind of, like, that can be the thing that, like, unites a lot of otherwise disparate communities on the surface. Like, not really. We're all one.
And does that play a role in the book?
I would hope so. I mean, the characters certainly understand that, like, there is also the fact that, like, all of my main characters in here, there's one Black character, but most of the main characters here are white. And I thought about, like, before writing this book, I'm like, first of all, does anybody need this white cisgender lady to opine on the Black Lives Matter movement, and a trans character? And the logic behind saying yes is because it's not just other people's fight. And so you've got to participate somehow. So that's why I'm over here writing my book of allies. But more than that, it's, I guess basically I would say there's a responsibility when you recognize that sort of violation of civil rights, of human rights, to see yourself in others and to make their problem your problem. And so all of these people are like, I'm not going to be the person standing beside the concentration camp going, I don't know what that is. I guess the Jews built it. Because that's the choice you're making. You're either participating or you're the one standing there just being like, I was just following orders. And who do you want to be in when all of this is over? Like, what kind of friends do you want to make? Like, what part of which community are you choosing?
But then take that a step further. Your two protagonists are, in that sense, voyeurs, because they're covering it, but they're not in it.
But coverage is necessary.
I
without
disagree, but they're covering activists, but they're not the activists. Although there are times when Devon is carrying a gun, and I guess that could make him a target.
I mean, the characters who are medics are participating in a very real, like, tactile, hands-on way. The lawyers are participating in a very real, tactile, hands-on way.
They are, and they are representing the people who are fighting. And I would imagine when called upon, they do things other than just what their intentions are, since they are often in the fray, but they don't step out of the fray necessarily the way Devon and Garrette often do, in order to maintain their sense of separateness.
Well, journalists also have their own rules. If you start participating, you no longer get to wave your press badge and walk past the people getting arrested. There are certain privileges to being a journalist and to saying, I'm not participating, I am observing, I am recording this, which they have to do lest they, get silenced with everybody else. Somebody has to be left behind to speak of what happened. And that is why there are rules to journalism. Not that I understand all of them, but that's sort of a rule that Garrett has embraced, because he was like, you said rule, I heard rule, makes sense to me. And Devon's like, rule schmools, like, who's gonna see me breaking it, huh? Who's gonna snitch? Like, so there are instances where they kind of like fudge around the edges with that, but they have to be observers. Otherwise, they lose their credentials essentially as journalists. And so it is what it is in a lot of situations. And it also depends on who you ask. There's plenty of journalists who've been arrested for doing nothing but journalism. So it's not like those rules will protect you necessarily. So it's a crapshoot. They try to adhere to certain philosophies and principles, and you won't always find those respected by the thugs that are here to stomp your civil rights. So
not everybody wants to be covered.
Right. And I mean, and that's something they also have to be cognizant of. Like, don't film people committing crimes or you're not helping them get away with it, are you? So that kind of thing. Or by identifying people who aren't there to be the face of a movement, they're just there to show solidarity. So everybody has to make their own decision with that. Each of the characters has their own little, like, or how much am I willing to put into this fight? How much can I sacrifice today? Everybody has to make that call. So, yeah.
So since this is largely based on what was going on at the time when you wrote it, and to some extent it played out in the election where Biden was elected, and there are no riots going on right now, at least in the United States to any degree. There are plenty going on around the world. would you say that that was your assumed culmination of the book as well?
Not necessarily, mostly because I did have at least one friend kind of like, oh, we had all those riots and upset in 2020 and like what happened? Nothing. And I was like, did nothing happen? Because a lot of people learned quite a bit about where their freedoms actually stop. And a lot of people made friends so that the next time something like this kicks off, they're going to have those connections already. They won't be starting from zero. They'll be starting from like a halfway point. And so what ends this book is mostly it's a summer romance. So when the summer ends, people kind of have to go their separate ways for whatever reasons. And nothing is finished as far as I'm concerned. The struggles aren't over. These people are still family to each other. So they shall meet again. But
well, and the relationship doesn't seem to necessarily be over.
No. It'll be changed, I imagine, but not to give people too many spoilers, I guess, if they don't want to hear them. But this was something that when I mentioned the agents who turned down representation, so I just went back home to my indie press that's always looked out for me, Lethe Press. Basically, one person just wouldn't engage in it at all because they were like, oh, I'm really worried that publishing isn't in a place to take this, and I don't like any of these, like I need a happily ever after ending, basically. And I'm like, what are you, a child? Like, what are you, a child? Are you a coward? Not to call names, but like, are you a coward? To say that publishing can't handle tough subjects, wrong. Or burn it down if it can't do that, then what is it for? Not to just comfort you on a beach read, please. But also to say like, oh, it's not gonna be happily ever after. I'm like, who said that? Have some imagination, people don't know their futures, so neither do these characters. They have a lot of suspicions about what might happen. Certainly Devon is a little concerned because he's been heartbroken before, so he's just kind of waiting for it to happen again. And because everything that's going on in their world, and the same as in ours, like you don't really know what kind of world you're gonna wake up to sometimes. Like it was a very anxious time because a lot of rules were being broken, and you were finding out kind of just how many rules aren't written, and how many laws aren't going to be enforced. Turns out, like there are a lot of people lacking moral fiber in our leaders. So, in knowing all that, yeah, you've just gotta hope for the best and carry through, as everybody does, as you like hurtle through time. So, certainly the ending isn't an ending. And this book is the first of what I'm considering an Americana trilogy that'll kind of treat some of the three biggest factors that happened in 2020, which was the Black Lives Matter movement, the pandemic, and then the ongoing labor struggles, and the recessions, and the places where people are getting hurt are all our essential workers who are just being like, just crushed. So that's what it felt like to me, is that like, man, it's like the 60s all over again, as far if the news reports are to be believed, is that like you've kind of got like 3 moments happening all at once. And so I've got a book for each one that I was able to identify. And so this is just one summer. The next one picks up for fall. The one after that picks up for winter and spring. So even when it ends, it's just because summer's ending. It's not because anything else is over.
So it's a seasonal book.
Yes.
Yet not a typical summer read.
No, it is still a summer romance, but it's a summer of riots. So
what would you want someone who reads the book to walk away with?
I think I'd want them to walk away with a longing or a pining for more of, I think more of the relationship at the central. I want them to feel, as the characters do, like, I need more of this. Like I can't, like to pull apart feels like leaving a piece of yourself behind, but also a longing for the kind of momentous times that can get stuff done, that actually changes hearts and minds. Those don't come around every year. They don't come around even every generation. But when the opportunity presents, basically you have to be you have to be ready to jump on it. You have to recognize it for the opportunity that it is. So that's what I would want people to walk away from this book feeling is kind of like, we need more, we need better. And in both.
Would you want them to feel that their own engagement matters?
Absolutely. Yeah. That you are part of this. You are friends with these people. Like these are fictional characters, but they're based on a lot of real life events and figures that I came across while just kind of watching 2020 unfold. Is to find some semblance of recognition. That's why there are different types of people, not necessarily, they've all got their, anti-fascist leanings, of course, but they come from kind of different walks of life, different backgrounds, but they're the found family. They find each other and they recognize something akin in one another. And I would want people to read this book and recognize, like, reminds me of me or my cousin or my best friend or my lover, or and to recognize that, like, this is, you're in this with them and they're in this with you, I guess.
Where are you in it?
Probably in that, like, Christopher Isherwood spot, I am the camera. Like, I didn't participate in any protests, mostly because at one point somebody said, like, man, if you've got an anxiety problem, maybe don't come out here and have a panic attack because it's not going to help. And I was like, gotcha, right? Citizen Fields reporting for duty. So I'll absolutely stay inside and not cause more trouble than I'm worth. But which is something people have to kind of take into account when they go to, if you want to, like, like go help out in a war zone or in like a peacekeeping mission or some kind of like aid, you have to make sure you're bringing more than you take, So yeah, that's my spot, is to observe the report, basically. Or at least that's where I see myself. Things can change.
But do you see yourself more a Devon than a Garrette, or more a Garrette than a Devon, or
probably their friend Tula, who's their friend Tula, who kind of like, she's a lot more contained within herself. She's when I introduce her in the book, she's Greek, so just an like untold generation democracy preserver. She's friends with Devon, but she doesn't let his problems become her problems. She carries out her journalism in the way she finds to be the most responsible, but she also has to stop sometimes and leave what's a very important time to be a reporter to go home and just like help somebody out in her family. So yeah, probably I find most in common with her. She's the one who's being like, oh, that's a lot of excitement. Why don't we turn in early, have a little self-care day, don't burn yourself out on this fight or you won't be able to fight tomorrow. So.
And that's a tough one in a world that never stops, to be able to say, nope, today I'm doing my nails.
Yeah.
And Garrette joins her.
Yes. To do his nails,
And then Devon shows up later. And it demonstrates that it is family by choice. That all of these itinerant workers have made their own family. And they take care of each other, and they're concerned about each other and their plants and their animals.
And I do work to contrast that with Garrett's aunt. When he's invited home, they're like, bring your new boyfriend. We're okay with you being gay. They don't know so much about the trans stuff, and they probably wouldn't be able to handle it, is what he comes to realize, is that, like, sure, they'll invite this boyfriend home. We'd like to meet your new friend, but I can't tell them everything about me. They just aren't ready for it. And so you realize you're kind of on your own. But no, you're not, because you're on your own with a lot of other people who are on their own, and they will help you. They will lend you a hand. They'll let you stay over. You can crash at my place. Let me teach you what I know so that you can teach somebody else. So all of that kind of, highlights the difference between the family shouldn't be that, like, obligation. It should be more like the privilege of caring for somebody, kind of a thing, and so they have to balance it all.
Did you feel that his aunt and uncle, or at least his aunt, was really making an effort?
She would think she was making an effort.
But I didn't ask what she would think.
Yeah.
I said, did Garrett think that she was making an effort?
I mean, as far as I consider her as like a character, she's making some effort. She didn't have to take him in when his parents kick him out. And it's a lot harder.
She didn't have to invite his boyfriend over for dinner, which certainly made her uncomfortable and made her husband uncomfortable.
Yeah, she was willing to make some efforts, maybe not all of the efforts, maybe not efforts on behalf of her and her husband, who's a different person and has his own different hangups about things. But she's trying to like kind of hold people together. She doesn't want to lose her nephew because there was some ugliness in the family where he had to go. She's a little bit more woke, although nowhere near as far as everybody else. But if she doesn't take him in, the life of a street kid is a far more precarious and dangerous one. The fact that Garrett has his GED is because his aunt let him stay somewhere. Without all of that, does he have a job? Is he okay? Like, is he ever safe? So yeah, she makes an effort that matters. That's for sure. And Garrett certainly recognizes that, but he also knows she could do more and that she's not going to, and he's not going to ask her to. So he's going to be like, all right, well, I'm not going to try and like strong arm, like we're family, make yourself comfortable with me. He's just going to be like, all right, well, you have my number, right? But he's also not going to change himself for the sake of her comfort or to stay within her family, because you've got to be who you are, whoever that ends up being. And so everybody's kind of making their, not quibbling so much, but everybody's picking their fights and what amount of energy they're going to put into any given one, because there are so many on all fronts. So, yeah.
But they both leave it open also. I mean, he does walk away in a sense, but she has not yet decided how far she can go.
Indeed, and life changes people. So right now, like Aunt Lilith is there with her husband in her normal heterosexual life, and she's just doing her, as far as she considers him her gay nephew, a favor. Well, someday her husband may die, and she may need a caretaker. And who's going to step up then? They don't have children, but she did once help this kid in his hour of need. Maybe he'll be there to help her in her hour of need. And sometimes, is it not enough? I don't know. Maybe it's not everything it could be, but it's a crutch, but it helps you walk, kind of a thing. So
it may be enough at the time.
Yeah, it's enough for now, and tomorrow is undecided.
So there's so much action in the book. There's violence, there's intimacy, but everything is heightened because of the tensions of the street. And even when they're trying to find quiet time, you can still feel that energy level pulsating and anticipation, constant anticipation. When is the next bomb going off? When is the next gunshot? When is the next scream? When is the next dog barking? How, as a writer, as someone who is engaged in writing about these kinds of things, how do you keep your momentum going? And how do you keep your characters alive so that you can tell the story? Not all of the books I've written have this, what one blurb reviewer called it, a sense of urgency to it. And I was just like, yes, I felt that while I was writing it, because that's what the summer felt like. It felt like every day was some new catastrophe. At some point when Tula comes to visit the boys, she knocks on the door and they're not expecting a visitor, and they both freeze and look at each other like, what is this? Like, are we about to be black bagged? Is this V for Vendetta right now? And then she announces, like, it's your friend Tula, open the door, you idiots. They're like, oh, how many? I mean, like, that causes real inflammation in people, like that kind of anxiety, that, like, that took a minute off your life, that spike of fear. And so that's why they have those moments of self-care. That's why, for the readers, there is an autonomous zone. When the boys go to an autonomous zone, there are some essay portions in here that ask you, like, I don't know, is tear gas flammable? Do you know? I don't know. Nobody will tell you. And that's a problem. So, because they're going to stuff it in your face. So, and throw it into a closed room with you. So, questions like that, questions like, are there any good guys? Is it possible to actually be anti-fascist when human beings
throughout history really fall in line, really cave to threats and terrorism a lot. For the autonomous zone, there's also an essay portion that's like, actually, yeah, we're not all monsters out here. Like if you've ever survived a hurricane, you know, being in Florida, I'm from Florida. Dude, when there's a hurricane and everybody's power is out, you'll come out and meet your neighbors and you're not fighting. Like you're not, I mean, like, well, what kind of paranoid person on the block you come out and say like, are you okay? Is anything on fire in your part of the neighborhood? Like, do you guys have enough? Well, we got plenty of water. Do you have any food? Do you have a heat source? Something like that. You'll start sharing showers and stuff. Like, hey, I just got power. Come to my place. You know, do some laundry so you can get through until your place gets it. Like, there's good in us too. So there is that respite in the book. So the reason it stays so frantic is because the year felt frantic. And a lot of the news stories that I bring up, some of them are specifically named in the book, and some of them are like, I kind of fictionalize what happened in this or that city and compile it into this unnamed, this Anywhere USA city that I've set my book in. But so just the pace of the news, the way it came in, that's what sets the pace of the book. But that's why they stop and go like, I'm not going out today. I don't care that we just had an insurrection at the plaza. Not today. Like, so I'll cover that tomorrow, or I'll catch the next catastrophe. There will always be another one, you know, like, don't worry about that YOLO stuff. Like it's fine. There's plenty of more catastrophes to witness. So they carve out their own areas of peace. I wanted the relationship between the boys to be a port in a storm, basically. We're like, sure, what's happening to them is chaotic, but they're very sure about how much they care about each other. Like the kind of love that, like, I mean, if it happens to me, like, I will quit my job and leave this country. If you meet somebody and you're just like, something about you, I'll throw my life away. I don't care. When that's mutual, it can be a beautiful thing. It can be a horrible thing too, like Leopold and Loeb, which you discussed, last month, and which I've written a book about as well. But they see each other, and it just has them. You know, it just makes sense for them. And so that is a place of peace between the two of them. And I see our friend Eric Rebane there. So shouting out the wrong way to be in love is Leopold and Loeb. I encourage you to get a hobby of journalism and, you know, do better with your folie à deux, right? So but the franticness comes from the reality of the summer. The moments of calm also come from the realities of the summer. People did carve out autonomous zones because they're like, God damn it, I need a place to mourn. I need a place to breathe. I need a place to cry and hug my neighbor, a stranger. Like, and so they had that. The moments that Devon has with a stranger who cries with him in the autonomous zone are based on a cab ride I had years ago. This is a 2020 story of just somebody, you know, like, basically I was, you know, it was a Lyft or an Uber driver or something. Just, we somehow got to talking about like mothers and how easy it is to forgive them when because they love you so much. Like, what are you gonna do? Be mad? She tried her best, you know? So she was, I was speaking of my mother, she was speaking of her daughter, and we just had a hell of a moment. And I get on and be like, I guess I'm going to work now. Geez. Like, you know, it's one of those things where like, you got to take those moments of respite. And so like everything's coming in fast and chaotic, but there will be moments of peace too, and of camaraderie. And if you recognize them, you'll value them. You'll find a way to make space for more of them, and you'll invite your friends over for tea, you know? So, yeah.
And is that what you do now?
Yeah, I mean, it's me and keep a very calm household. But I also, I write for a personal injury lawyer. So every day I'm writing about somebody's absolute catastrophe. I'm writing about the worst day in somebody else's life, but it's not in my life. And you have to learn how to compartmentalize that. Like, I've had my days of catastrophe too. And that day is not today. So save your energy for when you can help others. Save your energy for when you need to get out of a sinkhole. And the rest of the time, like, yeah, enjoy the quiet that you have, because that is not promised to you. So
just reminding people, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A and we will take questions in a moment. I'm just trying, for my own well-being, one of this chapters deals with Garrette's birthday, and he turns 18. And Was that something that was important for you to put in there, or was that something that just happened?
The reason that it happened is this is just like inside baseball when you're writing, like sometimes I need a birthday, and so somebody's having a birthday, all right? Because we need an occasion to get people together or to do something needs to happen. So like, it's a birthday time and we'll figure that out. So somebody needed to have, in fact, in the third book in the trilogy, I'm like, somebody's having a birthday because I need them to stop and hang out and reflect. And that's what birthdays are good for. I know for a lot of, I had at least one friend and a reviewer already just kind of be like the age thing, and that a lot of people they assume that 18 is the age of consent. I'm so sorry. You're going to want to watch out for your kids because it is not. Like check them laws, make people aware. That's just my civic duty, letting people know. Watch your teenagers. But they go out to have, that's one of those moments of respite where they go out to the woods. They leave like the gunmetal grim of the city, go out and touch grass, as the kids say, to keep their sanity and do drugs, like nice organic, drugs, nothing too chemical, like they're just on shrooms. But I guess to kind of like break down even more barriers between the two of them, because they've got a bit of a generational divide. In fact, all three of the Americana books, there's going to be a 15-year divide between all of them, although Garrett is the youngest. So everybody else is just going to be like an elder and a younger millennial, like how do they make it work? So it's weird. It's enough of a gap. But that was there because I knew I needed some peace for the reader, for me, for the characters. And so they make their own peace. They go out, they touch grass, they do drugs. They commune with nature, and then they come back refreshed. Like you're a little bit ready for another fight there. So the reason that his birthday happens is because why not his birthday? Nobody cares about Devon turning like 34 or whatever. Like this is kind of a big one. Turning 18 in a lot of ways is legally very different from being 17. You're an adult now, in everything except car rentals, I believe. So, the old joke about like, oh, you can get married and join the army and smoke a cigarette, like everything.
Go to a bar.
Yeah, that's right. Which is ridiculous. How are you going to send somebody to war and not buy them a drink? Excuse you. All right.
Well, they can buy the drink in Europe or Asia or Africa.
Yeah. Oh, I think we need to get either our army age needs to go up or our drinking age needs to go down. They got to pick one. But that's just my opinion for the troops. That's why the birthday happens for like 1,000 reasons. But
okay, so Eric wants to know, do you see yourself ever writing a more typical happy ending, or is that too boring? Not that his book had a happy ending.
It's what the reviewer didn't get to the end, but they're like, I either need a happily ever after or happy for now. And like they're happy for now, man. Like they'll find each other. But it's one of those things where like I mean, as far as the question goes for happy endings, I don't believe that happy endings are like that cotton candy kind of like, well, I just got my job in Paris and we're engaged and everything's fine now. Get like, yeah, and then add 25 years on it. Or do we still feel the same? It's people change so much. So there is, the happily ever after is honestly the day you die. Don't look forward to it that much. That's when you're really done. That's when you really finish the story. So like you have to leave room for people to grow and change and to be happy in different ways and sometimes with different people. So when it comes to like most of my books have like a central romance. Traditional to me seems kind of boring. If it's so traditional that you see it coming a mile away, you're not surprised by it. I'm like, what's the fun in that? I want to surprise people with different kinds of happy endings, basically. So no, I don't think it's going to be that typical, just because I want people to recognize happiness in all its forms. And sometimes it doesn't look like that trip to Paris with a ring on your finger, although that could be it too. So.
And Eric says, makes sense. Thank you. And on that, we're going to have to wait for the trilogy, so book 2 and book 3, to find out what happiness really looks like in LA's view.
Yeah.
I'm Robert Keston. I want to thank LA Fields for being with us. And once again, get your copy of Riot Son and read it, and it will remind you without question of the turbulent times that we've experienced here and others are experiencing in other parts of the world. I'm Robert Keston, Executive Director of Stonewall National Museum, Archives, and Library. And you are, once again, welcome to come here, visit us, see our exhibits, take out our books, and join us and join this community that celebrates authors, celebrates artists, and celebrates the history and culture of the LGBTQ community here in the United States and around the world. So thank you very much. It was fun, and I look forward to the future books and having you back when they are getting ready to come out rather than already out. Mm-hmm. And Eric, you know, you're welcome back too. So thank you both very much, and we'll speak to you soon. Have a good evening.